communism and Africa. At the moment, right now, we are sort of under siege by China, right? They have the buying power. They have the buying power, and a lot of African countries need a market, and they happen to be the largest market that they can see. Um, this is because African countries are not very adventurous, right? I think they forget that there is something as creating a market, right? So as opposed to just looking at China, which I think is more attractive to African countries because they are a communist state, and African countries before sort of behave like communist states. The whole everybody is one big family. You share what you have, and Ubuntu, basically. Ubuntu, Ubuntu. That's South African saying. I can't really say it properly. But this presents a problem because China is not the communist country that it used to be, right? They have completely changed, and they have embraced capitalism outside China. Outside China, they they have become the biggest capitalists on this planet right now. Outside China, right? So there's the facade of being a communist country, in China internally and whatever. But outside, we can see they have become uh, the. I wanted to use the word brutal, but I don't want to use the word brutal. Um, but just the outright pure capitalist, right? And in Namibia, I can present a case where an Asian company was opened here. It was Ramatex, and they instantly started causing problems. Number one, they pay people below the minimum wage. Number two, pollution. They were polluting the area around them, and that didn't matter as long as they output, right? uh, that sort of um, mentality that's being applied now on African resources is it's an impeding danger. It's going to become dangerous. I heard there are some plans to start a uranium mine in Namibia, and China would own 90% stake in that. In Namibia, I would have like 10. What's the point? And most of these things happen because of middlemen. The middleman gets a couple of millions from making the deal happen, and he's happy, right? And they are happy because they get the big deal, right? And I think being a mixed economy, this is where government intervention should immediately make itself known. Just like China makes itself known when foreign companies try to enter the Chinese market. I can give you an example. Facebook. Facebook tried for a really long time to infiltrate the Chinese market. But China then in turn created their own social networks and so forth, and they were fighting it off, right? And we need to adapt that kind of strict negotiation, negotiating skills. Uh, I would be happy with at least 60, 40, right? Even if we get 40 and they get 60. But just make sure that it's a fair deal that benefits the country and not just that middlemen or a group of middlemen, which are a few individuals, because these are national resources. And the talk of replanting velviches is absolutely insane. These are landmarks. We know how long velviches survive. They are like mountains. They outlive a lot of people, right? And who's to say that they can be retransplanted successfully? It hasn't been done. It hasn't been done before. So doing it, retrans- doing that, and then it fails, and then we have lost something that's on our money. The Volvicha is on our money, right? They are they're like landmarks, and this capitalist approach that China has developed, the go for the kill attitude, should be returned by African countries also putting their foot down. Because let's be honest, because of their strict capitalist mentality, they will be willing to negotiate. It becomes a thing of making the deal happen. That's where you want to get them. You want to get them to the point where they want the deal to happen, where it isn't really about capitalizing a lot, but uh, actually making the deal happen and having some stake in that. Because what China is doing is that they are investing in other countries, right? And as far as I know, African countries haven't invested in China. Uh, I don't even think European countries have invested in China. They keep themselves closed off unless they need to get out there and get something, right? So they make themselves staff negotiators, and that should be met with the same velocity, right? Number one, China is very traditional. The, going back and saying, no, I couldn't make the deal happen is humiliation. And to them, humiliation is a very big thing, right? You disgrace yourself. It goes so far as because of that, you would have disgraced your family and you disgrace that company that you work for, right? So they had to make the deal happen. And this um, should be used to our advantage, because we don't have the buying power, but what we do have is the raw um, the raw material, right? Even if it's not about us getting larger stakes in these projects, at least at least set up a program where these things can be refined in the country so that at least jobs are created and we get a bit more out of it. Then you know they can um, they can get a big stake from the mine while we get something from being a refinery of these raw projects. Even if it's like an even if it's almost like an umbrella companies from the actual companies, but the people should benefit more. If it's not more jobs, then it's a bigger stake because these negotiations, this type of negotiations, uh, these type of negotiations are for the people. These are our resources, right? This is our land. Let's not forget that. So if it's our land, we should protect it, not just for today, because the problem with short vision, just thinking about the now and not thinking about the long, the long vision. You know, having a long vision about the next generation and the next generation, and what will they have, right? This generation benefits, but the next one suffers. That burden, passing on the burden to the next, is something that needs to be changed because that has been one of the things that Africa has recycled, right? Africa has recycled burdens from one generation to the next, and there needs to be intervention in that, and we can intervene uh, because we are a mixed economy. We can intervene, the government can intervene and actually make it known, make it very transparent because the more transparent it is, the less room there is for corruption. And these guys are pretty corrupt, right? They are pretty corrupt. They use bribes and all sorts of methods to get um, what they want. So if it's transparent, um, clear for everybody to see, then we can tell whether it's a fair deal or not, and that's vital, especially for a small country like ours, right? We can't just say, okay, since we're not attracting investors from elsewhere, we should now be at the mercy of one country, and it's one country for crying out loud, not an entire continent. And since we are a country of national solidarity, enemy of none, we can look for other interested parties to negotiate with. We can, and you know, invest in that. Put put the team out there that tries to get investors who are interested in what we have to give. And of course, what we have is unique. There are lots of people I mean, lots of countries out there that are willing to deal, but the whole imperialist and what sort of mentality holds back trade, and we are at an age of global trade, right? And we have been outtraded enough to the point where we might even get driven into deficit, which completely beats the point. You know, what what's the point of it all if at the end of the day you get negative numbers or you barely break even, right? So more control and more transparency, and this is where um, the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade comes in, and this is where they have to be firm and very stern. Um, Not just look at the big offer that's being given, that is a short-term offer, but look at the long-term offer, as well as how the citizen can benefit from this, from their wages to safety, everything. Because these guys are not very big on safety, they are not very big on preventing pollution, right? You know, they are not very big on a lot of this stuff, and this inferiority complex where we think that we cannot uh, trade um, on an international level, it needs to go away because we can. Uh, Everybody on this planet breathes, eats, and are human beings, right? So we should meet them as such. The intimidation factors and intimidation tactics of the day should not lead to this lay approach to trade, because that is one of our strong points, is trade, right? And even if it means that we only end up with um, trade agreements with our fellow African countries, right? And we can actually come up with deals with our fellow African countries so that they can also have stake um, in the enterprises, right? Divide and make it more beneficial for your closest ally, right? Make them a part of it too, right? There is more than one way for us to do this, as for us to just look to China and say that's the only way to do it. These type of middlemen who don't have vision about the future are a danger. They are, in the long run, they are danger, because the damage afterwards becomes very difficult to fix. And one good example of this is when in America, when their economy nearly collapsed, right? They had to work overtime to fix their economy. Now Now, we're not a powerful economy to begin with. So something like that will be very devastating for us, right? Let's not forget that we are living in an age of alternatives. There are lots of alternatives that countries are looking toward that 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 produce less emissions, that are cleaner, you know. So we should also start setting up those standards, raise our safety standards, the emission tax. If they're mining here and there's some sort of pollution going on, they should be taxed on that, right? They should um, create policies where these kind of polluters are actually punished, right? Um, because the future is hard to fix. It's very difficult to fix. But the present gives us an opportunity to prevent the casualties before they even happen, right? Even the ones that seem the least probable can be prevented. So in turn, when we do trade agreements, we should look at the entire planet now. Now we should look at the entire planet. It's time for us to stop thinking small and start engaging the bigger picture. It takes longer periods, the negotiations are tougher, but in the long run, it's worth it. It's better than that quick deal where for an individual the benefits are big, but for the collective there are almost no benefits, right? We should benefit from trade because that's the stronghold of Africa is trade. We have the resources. That is where we get our GDP is from trade. So we should start looking more into our trade trade agreements, the policies, as well as protecting ourselves from being from suffering from corruption, right? We have a corruption problem locally, and now there comes foreign, foreigners who come with a do it however you can mentality, which would be corrupt practices, bribes, and so forth. You know, that should all be forethought and prevented, right? Because we need to start building a strong economy now. And I say now because now we have the advantage. The alternatives are still being theorized. They are still in uh, testing, testing mode, prototypes, and so forth. So we should use the time because what we have right now is time. Time is our friend at the moment. So we should use time to take advantage of getting fairer trade agreements. It's a definite must. And um, let's not forget about independent uh, independent negotiators, and these include negotiators from those countries. So engaging them to assist in the trade agreement is not really cheating. It's actually trying to um, even the odds, right? Because they are accustomed to their country's practices. They know what the end game is, and they could fill us in um, on a lot of data that we might not have. So there needs to be a lot of research before we just sign away our land and resources. No, we're not in the 70s anymore, where African countries are freshly becoming independent, or in the 90s, where we're still a baby country. Right, we're 25 now, and at this stage, we are maturing. Right, and as we mature, any mature adult knows that um, accountability of taking care of the people that they delegate is number one. So that same mentality should be in our trade agreements. How are the local citizens benefiting, and how will the collective nation benefit? We can, we can, we can trade. The low self-esteem and the corruption that led us to get um, very bad trade agreements where we nearly didn't really benefit should be dissolved, because now this is collaborative Africa, right? Now we're helping each other as a continent that suffered um, the same fate, and that is suffering the same fate, because China is almost in every African country. Now, I'm not saying we should be xenophobic. I'm not speaking of Chinese. I'm speaking of China, the country. Please understand that it's not. There is absolutely no racial context um, to this, and there shouldn't be any racial context to this uh, when it's being done. We should look at the country, right? And it's something I'm doing in my spare time, uh, researching the weaknesses that China has. The most known one is obviously pollution, and America is um, silently punishing them for that. Europe is silently punishing them for that, because we are starting to think uh, on a global context, right? Like global warming is something that affects everyone, right? Global warming affects everyone, no matter where you are. And that kind of mentality of preventing casualties that can go so out of hand that they end up impacting even your closest neighbors uh, should should be looked at and should be remedied. Right. So I think Namibia, we we are on the road to prosperity and poverty reduction by also looking at our trade agreements, looking at our strengths, and looking towards our neighbors. looking towards our neighbors to help us where we're weak, will help them where they are weak, right? So that we can start becoming very um, fast growing economies on a global scale, because we should start thinking on a global scale now. The times of thinking small should be behind us, and they are behind us, right? We are a world player. It's just maybe some haven't realized this, but trust me, the world has. So let's look at our disadvantages, and then let's look to our neighbors to help us with our disadvantages, and let's look at our strengths and see how we can capitalize even more on that, right? Because we're lucky enough um, to be sort of young in the world, where we can look at our mistakes, because our mistakes didn't happen hundreds of years ago or so forth. You know, they are new. They happened recently, right? So that gives us an opportunity to immediately identify our disadvantages. Um, yeah, salute, you know, the youth, citizens. Let's start informing